February 17th, 1981, Kalamazoo, Michigan. For 43 years, a killer hid in plain sight. On a frigid February morning in 1981, the small town of Kalamazoo, Michigan woke up to a nightmare that would haunt them for over 4 decades. What started as a missing person report would become one of the state's most baffling cold cases, leaving investigators stumped and a community forever changed. The call came in at 7:23 a.m. A frantic voice on the other end of the line reported that 23-year-old Jennifer Marie Collins hadn't come home from her evening shift at the local diner. Her car was found abandoned in the parking lot of Maple Creek Shopping Center, keys still in the ignition, purse untouched on the passenger seat. Jennifer wasn't the type to disappear without a word. She was a responsible young woman, working 2 jobs to save money for nursing school. Every Tuesday night, she closed the Silver Spoon Diner at 10 p.m. sharp, then drove straight home to the small apartment she shared with her younger sister, Sarah. But on February 17, 1981, Jennifer never made it home. The discovery that would send shockwaves through Kalamazoo came 3 days later. A jogger running through the wooded area behind Bronson Park stumbled upon something that made him immediately call 911. Jennifer's body was found partially buried under a thin layer of snow and fallen leaves, approximately 2 miles from where her car had been abandoned. The crime scene told a horrifying story. Jennifer had been brutally attacked, showing signs of a violent struggle. The medical examiner determined she had been sexually assaulted before being strangled with what appeared to be a rope or cord. Her winter coat was missing, and her work uniform was torn and disheveled. What made this case particularly disturbing was the calculated nature of the crime. The killer had clearly planned the attack, choosing a secluded location to dispose of the body. The shopping center where Jennifer's car was found was known to be poorly lit, with minimal security cameras in 1981. It was the perfect place for a predator to strike. Detective Robert Martinez, a 20-year veteran of the Kalamazoo Police Department, was assigned as lead investigator. He had worked dozens of homicide cases, but something about Jennifer's murder felt different. The level of violence suggested this wasn't the killer's first crime, yet there were no similar cases in the area. The initial investigation revealed troubling details. Jennifer had received several hang-up phone calls in the weeks leading up to her death. Her co-workers at the diner mentioned seeing a man in a dark sedan parked across the street during her shifts, watching the restaurant. When questioned, none of them could provide a clear description of the man or his vehicle. Physical evidence was limited but significant. Investigators found tire tracks in the muddy parking lot that didn't match Jennifer's car. There were also signs of a struggle near her vehicle, including scuff marks on the asphalt and a broken fingernail that belonged to the victim. Most importantly, the medical examiner recovered DNA evidence from Jennifer's body, though in 1981, DNA testing was still in its infancy. The case quickly became front-page news across Michigan. Jennifer's photograph appeared in newspapers from Detroit to Grand Rapids, with headlines screaming about the brutal murder of an innocent young woman. The community of Kalamazoo, population 80,000, had never experienced such a violent crime. Parents began walking their children to school, women avoided going out alone after dark, and local businesses installed additional security measures. Jennifer's family was devastated. Her parents, Robert and Margaret Collins, had immigrated from Ireland in the 1950s, seeking the American dream. They had worked tirelessly to provide their daughters with opportunities they never had. Jennifer was their pride and joy, the first in their family to pursue higher education. Her dream of becoming a nurse was cut short by a monster who lurked in the shadows of their seemingly safe community. The funeral drew hundreds of mourners. The small Catholic church on Vine Street overflowed with grieving friends, family members, and community members who had never even met Jennifer but felt compelled to pay their respects. The sight of her parents clutching each other as they followed their daughter's casket became an image burned into the collective memory of Kalamazoo. As winter turned to spring, the investigation intensified. Police interviewed over 200 people, including every male employee at businesses near the shopping center, registered sex offenders in the area, and anyone who had been seen in the vicinity on the night Jennifer disappeared. They followed up on dozens of tips from concerned citizens, but each lead seemed to hit a dead end. The killer had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a community living in fear. Little did anyone know that this case would remain unsolved for more than 40 years, becoming one of Michigan's most notorious cold cases. The name Jennifer Collins would become synonymous with justice delayed, a reminder that some monsters are capable of hiding in plain sight for decades. But in 2024, everything changed. Advanced DNA technology and a relentless FBI cold case team would finally unmask Jennifer's killer, leading to an arrest that would shock everyone who thought they knew their neighbors. The truth, when it finally emerged, would prove that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who seem the most ordinary. The year 1981 was a time of transition in America. Ronald Reagan had just been sworn in as the 40th president. MTV launched its first broadcast, and the country was slowly emerging from a recession. In Kalamazoo, Michigan, life moved at a different pace than in the bustling cities of Detroit or Chicago. This college town, home to Western Michigan University, prided itself on being a safe haven where families could raise their children without fear. Kalamazoo in 1981 was a community of 80,000 residents, nestled in the southwestern corner of Michigan. The city had built its reputation on paper mills, pharmaceutical companies, and the steady influx of college students who brought energy and economic stability to the area. Tree-lined streets stretched through neighborhoods where children rode bicycles until sunset and front doors remained unlocked well into the evening hours. The winter of 1981 had been particularly harsh. Snow blanketed the city from December through March, creating a picturesque but isolating landscape. The cold weather meant fewer people ventured out after dark, and the early sunset at 5:30 p.m. left many areas of the city shrouded in darkness by dinner time. Street lighting was sparse compared to modern standards, and many parking lots relied on just a few overhead lights to illuminate large areas. Jennifer Marie Collins embodied the spirit of her generation. Born on August 15, 1957, she was the eldest of 3 daughters in a tight-knit Irish Catholic family. Her parents, Robert and Margaret Collins, had arrived in Kalamazoo in 1955 with nothing but hope and determination. Robert found work at the Upjohn pharmaceutical plant, while Margaret cleaned houses for wealthy families on the city's west side. The Collins family lived in a modest 2-bedroom house on Pitcher Street in a working-class neighborhood where everyone knew their neighbors. Jennifer shared a bedroom with her younger sisters, Sarah and Mary, until she turned 18 and moved into a small apartment near downtown. Despite the cramped living conditions, the Collins household was filled with laughter, Irish folk music, and the constant aroma of Margaret's homemade bread. Jennifer had always been driven by a desire to help others. As a child, she would bandage her dolls and pretend to be a doctor. In high school, she volunteered at Bronson Methodist Hospital, pushing wheelchairs and reading to elderly patients. Her guidance counselor described her as compassionate, intelligent, and determined to make a difference in the world. After graduating from Loy Norrix High School in 1975, Jennifer enrolled in pre-nursing courses at Kalamazoo Valley Community College. The tuition was manageable, and she could live at home while completing her prerequisites. However, financial pressures forced her to take a break from her studies in 1978. Her father had been injured in an industrial accident at the plant, and the family needed additional income to make ends meet. Jennifer took a job as a waitress at the Silver Spoon Diner, a popular 24-hour restaurant on West Main Street. The diner served truckers, late-night shift workers, and college students looking for cheap meals and strong coffee. Jennifer quickly became a favorite among regular customers. Known for her warm smile and ability to remember everyone's usual order. She worked the evening shift from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m., Tuesday through Saturday. The Silver Spoon was more than just a workplace for Jennifer. It was a second family. The owner, Frank Kowalski, treated his employees like his own children. The other waitresses, cooks, and dishwashers formed a close bond, often gathering after work to share stories and decompress from busy shifts. Jennifer's co-workers described her as reliable, hard-working, and always willing to cover an extra shift when someone needed help. By 1981, Jennifer had saved enough money to return to school part-time while continuing to work at the diner. She planned to complete her nursing degree by 1984 and had already been accepted into Western Michigan University's nursing program. Her dream was to work in pediatric care, combining her love of children with her desire to heal and comfort others. Jennifer's personal life was equally fulfilling. She had been dating Michael Thompson, a fellow student at WMU, for nearly 2 years. Michael was studying engineering and shared Jennifer's ambition and work ethic. They talked about marriage after graduation and had even looked at small apartments they could afford together. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, shared values, and a vision of building a life together in Kalamazoo. The community Jennifer lived in was characterized by trust and familiarity. Crime rates were low, and violent crime was almost unheard of. The most serious incidents typically involved college students drinking too much or minor property theft. Residents felt safe walking alone at night, and many businesses operated on the honor system, trusting customers to pay for items even when no one was watching. This sense of security would be shattered forever on February 17, 1981, when evil invaded their peaceful community and took one of their brightest lights. February 17, 1981, started like any other Tuesday for Jennifer Collins. She arrived at the Silver Spoon Diner at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early as always. The lunch rush was winding down, and the familiar rhythm of clinking dishes and coffee brewing filled the air. Jennifer tied her apron, checked her section, and began serving the steady stream of customers who relied on the diner's comfort food and friendly service. The evening shift proceeded normally until closing time. Jennifer's last customer left at 9:45 p.m., and she began her usual closing routine. She wiped down tables, restocked napkin dispensers, and helped the kitchen staff clean up. The diner's security cameras, primitive by today's standards, captured Jennifer moving efficiently through her tasks, her brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing her standard uniform of a white blouse and black skirt. At exactly 10:03 p.m., Jennifer clocked out and said goodbye to the night cook, who was staying to prep for the morning shift. She grabbed her winter coat from the employee break room, a navy blue wool coat her mother had given her for Christmas. The temperature outside had dropped to 18 degrees, and snow was beginning to fall lightly. Jennifer walked to her car, a 1978 Honda Civic, parked in the diner's small employee lot behind the building. The lot was poorly lit, with only one overhead light casting long shadows between the vehicles. She unlocked her car door and placed her purse on the passenger seat, just as she had done hundreds of times before. What happened next would remain a mystery for over 4 decades. Somewhere between the diner and the Maple Creek Shopping Center, 2 miles away, Jennifer encountered her killer. The evidence suggested she had been forced from her vehicle, though whether this occurred at the diner or after she had driven to the shopping center remained unclear. Her abandoned Honda was discovered the following morning by a security guard making his rounds at Maple Creek Shopping Center. The car was parked in a remote corner of the lot, far from any stores. The engine was cold, indicating it had been there for hours. The keys dangled from the ignition, and Jennifer's purse sat untouched on the passenger seat, containing her wallet with $43 in cash and her driver's license. The positioning of the vehicle troubled investigators. It was parked in an area with no security cameras and minimal foot traffic, suggesting the killer was familiar with the shopping center's layout. Scuff marks on the asphalt near the driver's side door indicated a struggle had taken place. A broken fingernail, later confirmed to belong to Jennifer, was found embedded in the car's door frame. The search for Jennifer intensified over the next 3 days. Police, volunteers, and family members combed through wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and drainage ditches throughout Kalamazoo County. Search dogs were brought in from Grand Rapids, and helicopters scanned the landscape from above. The community rallied together, with hundreds of volunteers joining the effort to find the missing young woman. The grim discovery came on February 20th. A jogger running his usual route through Bronson Park noticed something unusual beneath a pile of snow and fallen branches. The partially concealed body was located approximately 50 yards from the main walking path, in a secluded area surrounded by dense trees. The crime scene revealed the brutal nature of Jennifer's final moments. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a ligature C, likely a rope or cord, that was never recovered. Her winter coat was missing, and her work uniform was torn and disheveled. The medical examiner determined that Jennifer had been killed elsewhere and then transported to the park, where the killer had attempted to conceal her body. Most disturbing was the methodical nature of the crime. The killer had chosen locations carefully, avoiding areas with witnesses or security cameras. The attack appeared premeditated rather than opportunistic, suggesting Jennifer had been specifically targeted, or that the perpetrator was an experienced predator who had planned similar attacks before. The Kalamazoo Police Department launched their most intensive investigation in the city's history, within hours of discovering Jennifer's body. Detective Robert Martinez assembled a task force of 12 officers, working around the clock to process evidence and interview potential witnesses. The pressure from the community and media was immense, with daily headlines demanding answers and justice for the murdered young woman. The initial investigation focused on Jennifer's personal life. Police scrutinized her boyfriend Michael Thompson, subjecting him to multiple interrogations despite his solid alibi. On the night of February 17th, Michael had been studying for midterm exams at the university library until it closed at midnight, with dozens of witnesses and security footage confirming his presence. Nevertheless, investigators spent valuable weeks examining their relationship, searching for signs of domestic violence or hidden conflicts that might have motivated murder. The second major focus became Jennifer's co-workers and customers at the Silver Spoon Diner. Police interviewed every employee who had worked with Jennifer over the past year, looking for anyone who might have developed an unhealthy obsession with her. They compiled a list of regular customers who had shown particular interest in Jennifer, including several truck drivers who frequented the diner during overnight stops. One customer, a 42-year-old construction worker named Dale Morrison, became the primary suspect after several witnesses reported seeing him arguing with Jennifer 2 weeks before her death. Morrison had allegedly become upset when Jennifer refused his repeated requests for a date, and co-workers remembered him making inappropriate comments about her appearance. Police arrested Morrison on February 28th, 11 days after Jennifer's murder. The arrest generated significant media attention, with local newspapers declaring the case solved. Morrison had a criminal record including assault charges and had been drinking heavily on the night of Jennifer's disappearance. His alibi was weak, claiming he had been home alone watching television, with no witnesses to corroborate his story. Under intense interrogation, Morrison's story changed multiple times, further convincing investigators of his guilt. However, the case against Morrison began to unravel within weeks. The tire tracks found at the shopping center didn't match his vehicle, and he drove a pickup truck rather than the sedan witnesses had described seeing near the diner. More importantly, Morrison's blood type didn't match biological evidence recovered from the crime scene. In 1981, DNA testing wasn't available, but blood typing could eliminate suspects. After holding Morrison for 6 weeks, prosecutors were forced to release him due to insufficient evidence. The premature arrest had damaged the investigation's credibility and wasted crucial time when leads were still fresh. Morrison later sued the city for false imprisonment, receiving a settlement that further embarrassed the police department. The investigation's second major error involved the mishandling of physical evidence. The crime scene at Bronson Park had been contaminated by numerous searches before being properly secured. Footprints, tire tracks, and other potential evidence were destroyed by well-meaning volunteers who had trampled through the area during the search for Jennifer's body. Additionally, the rope or cord used to strangle Jennifer was never found, despite extensive searches of the area. Investigators theorized that the killer had taken it with him, but some evidence suggested it might have been overlooked during the chaotic initial search. The missing murder weapon would prove to be a critical gap in the case. Police also struggled with the limited forensic technology available in 1981. The DNA evidence collected from Jennifer's body was carefully preserved, but genetic fingerprinting wouldn't become widely available for criminal investigations until the late 1980s. Fingerprint analysis of Jennifer's car and personal belongings yielded no matches in existing databases, leaving investigators with few concrete leads to pursue. By summer 1981, the task force had interviewed over 300 people and followed up on more than 150 tips from the public. They had investigated similar crimes in neighboring states, looking for patterns that might indicate a serial killer. Despite their efforts, no viable suspects emerged, and the case began to stagnate. The investigation's final major setback came when Detective Martinez, the lead investigator, suffered a heart attack in August 1981 and was forced to retire. His replacement, Detective James Sullivan, inherited a case file filled with dead ends and a community growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress. By December 1981, the Jennifer Collins murder investigation had effectively stalled. Detective James Sullivan had exhausted every lead, re-interviewed key witnesses, and consulted with experts from the Michigan State Police Crime Lab. The case file had grown to over 800 pages, but none of the accumulated evidence pointed to a viable suspect. The killer had seemingly vanished without a trace. The transition from active investigation to cold case was gradual but inevitable. By 1982, the task force was disbanded, and the case was assigned to a single detective who reviewed it monthly alongside dozens of other unsolved crimes. The evidence was carefully catalogued and stored in the police department's basement, where it would remain largely untouched for the next 2 decades. The impact on Jennifer's family was devastating and long-lasting. Robert Collins never fully recovered from his daughter's murder, developing severe depression and turning to alcohol to numb his pain. He lost his job at the Upjohn plant in 1983 and struggled to maintain steady employment afterward. Margaret Collins became the family's primary breadwinner, taking on additional house-cleaning jobs to support her remaining daughters and pay for grief counseling that provided little relief. Sarah Collins, Jennifer's younger sister, was 17 when the murder occurred. The trauma fundamentally changed her life trajectory, abandoning her plans for college to stay close to home and help care for her parents. She married young, moved just 2 blocks from the family home, and became fiercely protective of her own children, rarely allowing them out of her sight. The fear that Jennifer's killer remained free in their community haunted Sarah for decades. The broader Kalamazoo community also bore lasting scars from the unsolved murder. Parents implemented new safety rules for their children. Businesses installed additional security measures, and the general atmosphere of trust that had characterized the city was permanently altered. The Silver Spoon Diner, where Jennifer had worked, experienced a significant decline in customers, particularly during evening hours. Frank Kowalski, the owner, eventually sold the restaurant in 1984, unable to overcome the association with the tragedy. Local media coverage of the case gradually diminished, though the Kalamazoo Gazette published anniversary articles each February 17th for the first decade. These stories typically featured interviews with Jennifer's family and updates from police, who consistently maintained that the case remained active despite the lack of new developments. The annual coverage served as a painful reminder to the community that justice had not been served. Several potential breaks in the case emerged over the years, but ultimately led nowhere. In 1987, a convicted rapist in Ohio claimed responsibility for Jennifer's murder during a plea bargain negotiation, but his confession contained numerous factual errors and was quickly dismissed. A similar false confession occurred in 1993, when a death row inmate in Texas attempted to trade information about Jennifer's case for a commuted sentence. The introduction of DNA testing in the late 1980s initially raised hopes for solving the case. In 1989, the preserved biological evidence from Jennifer's body was submitted for analysis, confirming the presence of the killer's genetic material. However, without a suspect to compare it against, the DNA profile simply became another piece of evidence waiting for a match. The case received renewed attention in 1995 when the FBI launched its combined DNA index system known as CODIS. Jennifer's case was among the first cold cases submitted to the national database, but no matches were found. The killer's DNA profile was entered into the system, where it would remain dormant for years, waiting for technology and circumstances to align. Detective Sullivan retired in 1998, passing the case to a new generation of investigators who brought fresh perspectives but faced the same fundamental challenges. Physical evidence had been properly preserved, witness statements were thoroughly documented, but the killer had left no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no clear motive that investigators could identify. As the 20th anniversary of Jennifer's murder approached in 2001, her case had become a symbol of justice delayed. The Collins family had endured 2 decades of uncertainty, never knowing if the person who destroyed their lives might be living among them, working alongside them, or simply watching from the shadows as they struggled to rebuild their shattered world. The breakthrough in Jennifer Collins' murder came from an unexpected source in March 2024, 43 years after her death. FBI Special Agent Lisa Chen, assigned to the Bureau's cold case unit in Detroit, had been systematically reviewing Michigan's oldest unsolved homicides using advanced genetic genealogy techniques that hadn't existed when the original investigation took place. The FBI's renewed interest in the case began with the development of enhanced DNA analysis technology. The biological evidence collected from Jennifer's body in 1981 had been carefully preserved, but was considered too degraded for traditional DNA testing. However, new extraction methods developed in 2023 allowed scientists to recover a complete genetic profile from samples that were previously unusable. Agent Chen submitted the enhanced DNA profile to Family Tree DNA and GEDmatch, public genealogy databases containing millions of genetic profiles from people researching their family histories. Within weeks, the system identified several distant relatives who shared genetic markers with Jennifer's killer. The matches were distant, typically third or fourth cousins, but they provided the foundation for building a family tree. Working with genetic genealogist Dr. Barbara Moore, Agent Chen spent months constructing detailed family trees for each DNA match. The process involved researching birth records, marriage certificates, obituaries, and census data dating back to the 1800s. Gradually, a pattern emerged pointing to descendants of Irish immigrants who had settled in Michigan during the early 1900s. The investigation focused on male descendants who would have been between 20 and 50 years old in 1981 and had connections to the Kalamazoo area. The list initially contained over 40 potential suspects, but careful analysis of geographic and temporal factors narrowed it to 12 individuals. Agent Chen's team began conducting surveillance and collecting discarded DNA samples from these suspects. The breakthrough came when investigators obtained a coffee cup discarded by 68-year-old Thomas Patrick O'Brien outside a McDonald's in Portage, Michigan, just 15 miles from Kalamazoo. O'Brien had worked as a maintenance supervisor at Western Michigan University from 1978 to 2010, giving him intimate knowledge of the area where Jennifer's body was discovered. The DNA extracted from his saliva on the coffee cup was a perfect match to the genetic profile from the crime scene. Further investigation revealed disturbing details about O'Brien's background. In 1981, he had been 25 years old, married with 2 young children, and living in a modest home just 3 miles from the Silver Spoon Diner. His work schedule at the university was flexible, often requiring him to work evening and weekend shifts to maintain campus buildings and grounds. This schedule would have given him the opportunity to observe Jennifer's routine at the diner. O'Brien's personnel file at Western Michigan University contained several complaints from female students about inappropriate behavior, including unwanted advances and comments about their appearance. However, these incidents had been handled internally and never resulted in criminal charges. His supervisors had noted his knowledge of the campus layout, including remote areas like the wooded section of Bronson Park, where Jennifer's body was found. The FBI discovered that O'Brien had owned a dark blue 1979 Ford sedan in 1981, matching witness descriptions of the vehicle seen near the Silver Spoon Diner. He had sold the car in April 1981, just 2 months after Jennifer's murder, claiming he needed a more reliable vehicle for his growing family. The timing of the sale raised additional suspicions among investigators. Background checks revealed that O'Brien had no criminal record, which explained why his DNA had never appeared in law enforcement databases. He had lived an apparently normal life for 4 decades, raising 3 children, maintaining steady employment, and participating in community activities. His neighbors described him as quiet but helpful, often volunteering to shovel driveways or help with home repairs. On April 15, 2024, FBI agents arrested Thomas O'Brien at his home in Portage. The arrest was conducted early in the morning to minimize public attention, but news of the development spread quickly through the community. O'Brien's wife and adult children expressed shock and disbelief, insisting that there had been some mistake. His family had no knowledge of his connection to Jennifer's murder and struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the monster who had terrorized Kalamazoo over 4 decades earlier. The arrest marked the end of one of Michigan's longest-running cold cases and the beginning of a legal process that would finally bring closure to Jennifer Collins, family and the community that had never forgotten her. The arrest of Thomas Patrick O'Brien sent shockwaves through Kalamazoo and the surrounding communities. Local news stations interrupted regular programming to announce the breakthrough, and within hours, the story had spread across national media outlets. After 43 years of uncertainty, the man responsible for Jennifer Collins' brutal murder had finally been identified and taken into custody. The reaction from Jennifer's surviving family members was a complex mixture of relief, grief, and anger. Sarah Collins, now 60 years old, had spent most of her adult life wondering if her sister's killer was still living among them. The confirmation that O'Brien had indeed remained in the area for decades was both validating and deeply disturbing. Margaret Collins, Jennifer's mother, had passed away in 2019 at age 87, never knowing that justice would eventually come for her eldest daughter. Robert Collins, Jennifer's father, was 89 years old and living in a nursing home when news of the arrest reached him. Despite his advanced age and declining health, he understood the significance of the moment. For the first time in over 4 decades, he expressed hope that his daughter could finally rest in peace. The family released a statement thanking the FBI and local law enforcement for never giving up on Jennifer's case. the community's response was equally powerful. Residents who had lived through the fear and uncertainty of 1981 felt a sense of vindication that their concerns had been justified. O'Brien had indeed been hiding in plain sight, working at the university, raising his family, and participating in community events while carrying the secret of his horrific crime. Many expressed anger that he had been allowed to live a normal life, while Jennifer's family suffered for decades. Local media coverage was extensive, with the Kalamazoo Gazette publishing a special edition detailing the case's history and resolution. Television news crews descended on the city, interviewing longtime residents who remembered the original investigation and the climate of fear that had gripped the community. The Silver Spoon Diner, which had closed in 1984, became a focal point for reporters seeking to understand the case's impact on local businesses. O'Brien's arrest also raised questions about other unsolved crimes in the area. FBI investigators began reviewing cold cases from the 1970s and 1980s, looking for potential connections to O'Brien. His access to university facilities and knowledge of remote areas made him a person of interest in several missing person cases, though no definitive links were established. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. O'Brien was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and criminal sexual conduct. Despite his age, prosecutors sought life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, arguing that the severity of the crime and the decades of suffering inflicted on Jennifer's family warranted the harshest possible sentence. O'Brien's defense attorneys initially considered challenging the DNA evidence, but ultimately advised their client to accept a plea agreement. On September 12, 2024, Thomas O'Brien pleaded guilty to all charges in a packed Kalamazoo County courtroom. Jennifer's family members were present for the hearing, finally able to face the man who had destroyed their lives. The judge sentenced O'Brien to life in prison without parole, ensuring he would never again have the opportunity to harm another innocent person. The resolution of Jennifer Collins' murder case became a symbol of hope for families of other cold case victims. It demonstrated that advances in forensic science and the dedication of law enforcement could bring justice even decades after a crime was committed. The case also highlighted the importance of preserving evidence and never giving up on the pursuit of truth. Jennifer Collins was finally at peace, and her family could begin the process of healing that had been delayed for over 4 decades. The young woman who had dreamed of becoming a nurse and helping others had in death helped advance the science of criminal investigation and brought closure to a community that had never forgotten her. Her legacy would live on in the countless other cold cases that might one day be solved, using the same techniques that finally brought her killer to justice.